One of the greatest secrets of the Cold War is still hidden. What if I told you that the CIA launched a global network of spy bases operating undercover all over the world, and agents like Jane Smith are part of this vast system? This secret promises to overturn everything you knew about the post-war era. And this is not just fiction or myth. Here's one of the most discussed documents. The code, Unbreakable, confirms the escape. This secret code, by which the CIA organized one of the largest operations of the 20th century, allowing not only notorious criminals, but also some of the greatest enemies of the West to escape. This is not just a chess game on the international stage, but a painful and dangerous web of interests, manipulations, and intrigues. Today, we unravel one of the most shocking CIA operations, which spanned not only Europe, but also South America, and even Australia, unveiling a network of spy stations and covert operations that remained hidden from the world. The CIA, the largest and most powerful intelligence agency in the United States, used numerous tools and strategies to achieve its goals during the Cold War. One of its most secret and effective tools was the training center they created, known as the Farm, CIA Camp Perry. Here, agents were trained for the most difficult operations outside of the U.S., from espionage and counterintelligence to technical operations, including the hacking of enemy communications and securing high-level secrets. Training at the Farm included not only physical preparation, but also intellectual skills for processing information and preparing for dangerous missions. Special attention was given to developing the agents' ability to work undercover, enabling them to successfully operate in countries with high national security, even among U.S. allies where they had to conceal their true purpose. These trainings formed the foundation for the CIA's global operations, which began to unfold on the international stage. Agents trained at the Farm carried out numerous operations, often in countries where official U.S. presence was prohibited. After completing their training, agents became part of the CIA's global network of spy stations, covering all of Europe, South America, Asia, and Africa. One of the greatest secrets, which became available only many years later, were rumors about the CIA's global encryption operations. As often happens in intelligence, what was initially seen as fiction became reality over time. Operations using hacking tools to breach enemy communications became a common tool of espionage. This marked the first step in the creation of the CIA's global hacker network, which began to operate actively in the 1980s and 90s, providing agents the ability to infiltrate enemy computer systems, gather important data, and manipulate information. This was a groundbreaking move for the time. The strategies for advancing agents through these secret hacker networks allowed the CIA not only to carry out traditional espionage operations, but also to take control over information flows in countries under the influence of the USSR and other enemies of the United States. Hacking these information systems allowed the CIA to gather intelligence that would otherwise have been inaccessible, as well as to identify foreign agents and organize operations to destroy the enemy's information channels. All of this was implemented in operations that took place in Europe, particularly in Frankfurt, where the CIA had one of its largest and most important bases in the world. Frankfurt became not only an important intelligence center, but also one of the key hubs for coordinating operations in Europe. The CIA skillfully used U.S. consulates and embassies in Europe as cover for its agents, allowing them to move freely between countries without significant restrictions. In Frankfurt, the CIA actively used cover for its agents. They operated under the guise of diplomats, consular staff, and business people, thus masking their true objectives. One such agent was Jane Smith, whose operations became known only after many years. She was part of the so-called CIA Cyber Intelligence Center, which was involved in developing modern hacking tools for infiltrating enemy information systems. It was later revealed that Frankfurt had become one of the key stages in the development of the CIA's global network of spy bases. From this base, operations were coordinated worldwide, from gathering intelligence to actively sabotaging and undermining the military operations of the enemy. Agents succeeded in infiltrating the most complex targets, bypassing national security systems, and retrieving data that became crucial for subsequent military and political strategies of the United States. Despite the large number of operations, the biggest surprise came with the CIA's appearance in South America. Initially, Latin American countries such as Argentina did not appear to be such an important theater for Cold War operations, but the situation changed in the late 1940s and early 1950s. This became a place where the CIA carried out a series of incredible missions, including hacking operations, using local governments and organizations capable of covering up the activities of American agents. Instead of openly interfering in the internal affairs of these countries, the CIA used the support of local political elites to secure its own interests and eliminate Soviet influence from the region. Latin American countries became intelligence launchpads and, at the same time, a source of resources for future international operations. The CIA actively used local political forces, supporting dictators and even organizing military coups to guarantee control over the situation in key areas. Agent Lorenzo Salgado received the command Zorya, which marked the beginning of an important operation that would have significant consequences not only for his career, but also for the future of many others. This command was the first signal that the operation to help a well-known figure, one of the most notorious escapes in the post-war world, was advancing to a new level. Instead of staying within Europe, the agents were tasked with preparing and executing a plan that would allow this fugitive to avoid not only the hands of the Allies, but also their own government. All traces had to be concealed as much as possible, which is why their route led through Spain, a country that was to be a temporary refuge for their precious cargo. Spain, which at that time remained one of the most favorable countries for the CIA, was to become the springboard for the next phase of the escape. Immediately after receiving the order, Salgado and his team began working on organizing safe routes. Spain was a crossroads for many smugglers and even spies, who required constant cover to avoid capture by local police or intelligence agencies. Carefully crafted documents, forged passports, new identities, and inconspicuous paths. All of these became part of the operation, where each step could be fatal. The agent network worked almost around the clock, ensuring safe passage through various countries in Europe. The process of creating these documents was as important as the route itself. All documents had to look realistic and retain all the necessary information to confirm their authenticity. Spain was to be the place where the transition from the real world to the alternative one, where an agent could be anyone, would be completed. Spain was also crucial in terms of finding allies among local sympathizers who could help the agent adapt to the new reality, providing shelter and access to the necessary resources. Meanwhile, other agents were working on preparing documents for another part of the group. The document Operación W9 became one of the main secret developments of the CIA during this period. Prepared with the help of agents working undercover, this letter was encrypted and contained important instructions for the next stages of the escape. Only the best hackers could decipher the contents of this document, and it was these instructions, along with encrypted codes and commands, that helped agents stay several steps ahead of the enemy. The entire process from start to finish was carefully planned to leave no trace, ensuring that communications between agents remained undetected. The Los Platas ranch in Argentina became the key point in the entire plan. After Salgado successfully organized the entire escape procedure and the documents were ready, he set off for the location that would serve as the temporary refuge for the person going into exile. At Los Platas, CIA agent Jane Smith had her first contact with the local liaison, Rafael Gutierrez. Gutierrez, who later became one of the most important people in the CIA's network in South America, had a long history of cooperation with American intelligence. Gutierrez was not only an important link in the network, but also a key figure who was supposed to help agents adapt to an entirely new reality, far from the familiar contexts of Europe. He managed a network of people who ensured all the necessary conditions for the safe stay of agents and their fugitives in Argentina, a country that already had a clear understanding of what international politics and espionage operations looked like. With his help, the CIA gained the ability to solidify its presence on the continent, creating encrypted communication channels and intelligence networks that operated based on the national interests of the United States. Rafael Gutierrez had connections among local politicians and businessmen and was ready to provide not only security, but also logistical support in operations related to intelligence and sabotage. His network became the foundation for future CIA operations in Latin America, particularly in countries that supported anti-communist sentiments. Gutierrez acted as an intermediary between the U.S. government and local governments, ensuring the legitimacy of the CIA and helping the escape operations maintain a low profile. Over the next few years, operations through Los Platas became a true legend in American intelligence circles. However, despite the meticulousness and complexity of the plan, every step was fraught with danger. Underground communication channels, numerous meetings with secret agents, and numerous documents that remained encrypted formed the basis for large-scale international operations that could change the course of history. Life in Argentina became an entirely new stage in Jane Smith's career. From the underground labyrinths where everything was under control to the endless spaces of South America, she had to adapt to a new environment, new risks, and new challenges. Although it seemed that she could feel safe here, in reality, this was a temporary refuge where she couldn't relax for a moment. She observed the changes in her surroundings, the locals' looks, their movements, their language. All of this required her constant attention. Jane lived in constant tension, where every little detail could be decisive. She understood that at any moment her stay here could be in question. But despite all the dangers, she couldn't help but notice the contrast between her past and her present life. In Europe, everything was clearly defined, controlled, with clear boundaries and rules. But here in Argentina, it seemed that everything was free. But this freedom was the most dangerous thing. The lack of proper control often led to unpredictable consequences. Jane could no longer work as she did before. She no longer had such powerful mechanisms of influence at her disposal. Everything depended on her ability to stay hidden. Yet even here, among the people she worked with, Jane felt an uneasy tension. As a CIA agent, she knew that every acquaintance could be part of another enemy network, ready to expose her. Her spy instincts never rested, and even among her colleagues, she often tried to scan people, looking for small details that would indicate their true intentions. In such a world, trust became a rare and dangerous commodity. Jane clearly understood that working among other agents and local allies, she had to be cautious, paying attention to every word, every gesture, especially when it came to technical operations and data concealment. Her work required constant suspicion. She was one of those who did not trust even her closest colleagues, because each of them could be a potential agent of another state or organization. And even if someone from her colleagues seemed absolutely reliable, Jane always believed it was wise to leave room for doubt. Her intuition told her that in a world where everyone is playing high-stakes games, naivety was dangerous. Domestic problems also became a part of her new life. The memories of intense operations in Europe, full of dynamics and speed, gradually gave way to routine household concerns. Life in Argentina, while it seemed to offer more freedom, was still extremely nerve-wracking. All those late-night calls from unknown numbers, the unsettling noises outside the window that scared her every time she lay down to sleep, became a burden that grew with each passing day. Jane could not afford to relax even for a moment. Every call could be a signal that everything was over, and her shelter would no longer be safe. At night, when it was unclear what would happen the next day, Jane often woke up thinking that everything she had achieved could fall apart in an instant. It was in these moments that she felt most vulnerable. She replayed every detail of the operation over and over again, every moment when something could go wrong. The feeling of fear and constant threat became an inseparable part of her existence. Despite all the security measures, she could not shake the thought that she might be exposed. All those unknown calls, which possibly carried the message that her time in this place had ended, filled her with nerves and anxiety. All these stresses and worries shaped her behavior, becoming part of Jane's daily life. She was no longer the agent who could control the situation. Now she resembled a prisoner, waiting for the first sign that someone from her surroundings could betray her or reveal her true purpose. These nightly anxieties, this constant movement, unrest, had long become her constant companions. And although Jane had grown used to difficult conditions, deep down, she felt that no security was permanent when you're in the role of a fugitive. In Argentina, where it seemed that everything could be forgotten and left in the past, every step was in question. Jane was constantly in contact with those who helped her secure her refuge, but she had no guarantee that this help wouldn't become the end of her mission. She didn't know how much longer she could remain in the safe zone, or when the moment would come when they would find her. The time she spent in this new reality became an endlessly hard and uncertain period for her. The analysis of facts versus legend always requires attention to every detail, every document, and every word that was spoken or recorded, especially when it comes to CIA archives marked classified. It is in these archives that the most important documents related to operations, which have remained closed to the public for a long time, are stored. Therefore, analyzing the truthfulness of the escape story and its confirmation through official and alternative sources is a real challenge for any researcher who wants to see where the boundary lies between truth and fiction, between reality and myth. The CIA archives contain numerous documents that are of great importance for understanding these events. It is clear that every document marked classified is part of a larger picture, one that has been carefully filtered to maintain national security. These records do not always provide the full picture, as much of this material continues to remain in the shadows. And only when new sources of information emerge does the intelligence agency lose control over old secrets. But even when access to the archives becomes possible, researchers face difficulties in assessing their truthfulness. When it comes to the documents stored in the CIA, they often contain processed and somewhat simplified information. The official version of history often covers multi-layered manipulations of facts used to benefit the agency. However, alternative sources, such as records from other intelligence agencies, interviews with witnesses and experts, may differ significantly from official statements, offering a completely different perspective on events. In the search for truth, interviews with historians who study this period are also important. They have access to fragmented and sometimes inconsistent sources, from which conclusions can be drawn. One of the biggest gaps in understanding such operations appears precisely due to the discrepancies between official CIA documents and records from other archives, including Soviet and Western European ones. For example, in 2013, new testimonies emerged about how the CIA stored materials about key operations in its archives, and this cast doubt on much of what had previously been considered standard practice. Comparing two versions, the official CIA information and leaks from different archives, shows how manipulations can change the assessment of events. Official documents contain a large number of simplified facts or those adapted to the political situation. Meanwhile, documents from alternative sources, especially those stored in the vaults of old archives, often provide many more details that ultimately change the picture, revealing previously unknown aspects of intelligence and espionage operations. This contrast between the two versions also highlights the core problem of such investigations: how to separate truth from fiction when official archives always withhold part of the information to avoid international scandal or political pressure. Although some documents related to this operation have been declassified, there are still many unknown details that remain under the label "for official use only." The conclusion that can be drawn is that, Although much information is already in the public domain, many facts remain in the shadows, some of which may never be revealed. What further intensifies the sensationalism of this topic is the fact that even after decades, there are still documents that have not been declassified or have never even reached the hands of historians and journalists. The true content of some operations and important intelligence missions may remain unknown to the general public. Therefore, we can conclude that there are still many dark spots in the history of CIA operations that will maintain their mystery for many years. And despite numerous leaks and investigations, some documents still remain under the strictest secrecy. History is still being written, and the truth remains in the shadows. Jane sat in the dark corner of her room, where the moonlight barely illuminated her face. She held in her hands a report that would determine the next direction of her operation. But her thoughts drifted from the documents to what was really happening, and what her identity might mean for this network. She knew very well that her role in these operations was more than important. She had become part of a global game where every step could be fatal. If her identity were exposed, all her work, every mission, every step, could turn into a tragedy. She still remembered her first days in the CIA, when she was taught that secrecy and concealment were the foundation of her existence. Jane, like many other agents, was just a part of a larger machine. She knew that if she was exposed, a whole chain of consequences would be difficult to predict. Not only would her life be at risk, everything she had touched would become vulnerable. Her name would become a symbol of betrayal, and the operational data she had gathered over the years could be used against the CIA or the United States as a whole. Her biggest weakness was her reality as an agent. Everything she had done was masked by shadow, and that shadow was her security. But like any agent, Jane couldn't help but wonder if the time had come when this secret would start slipping out of control. All these years, she had been a tool in the hands of greater games, but could the CIA really control its agents when everything was on the line? Her life, her mission, they were the result of how many years of American intelligence had managed her and her actions. Yet, in a world where traitors, spies, and paranoia had become the norm, could such a massive organization really control every movement of its agents? And when the day finally came that their agents stepped beyond the allowed boundaries, could this structure stop them? The deeper Jane delved into her thoughts, the clearer it became that her role in this whole story was temporary. She was a tool, and although she had her mission, every day spent in service made her more vulnerable. She understood that her fate depended not only on what she did, but also on how the situation could change at any moment. This business did not allow for long-term guarantees. In the world of intelligence, stability did not exist, and her time as an agent was limited. Sooner or later, her mission would end, whether through exposure or through new tasks that required new faces. And while Jane was confident in her abilities and ready for any difficulties, deep in her heart, she knew that one day this moment would end. Her role in the operations was just a stage on the way to something bigger, something she couldn't foresee. She lived with this sense of temporariness every day, and it was what made her so cautious, so attentive to every detail. This realization that her time in this game was limited gave Jane new motivation to act quickly, take risks when necessary, and not fall into apathy, knowing that the day when all of this would end was inevitably approaching. After all these facts, theories, and intrigues, one shocking fact leaves us with open questions. Can we believe everything we've learned about the CIA and its international operations? How many more documents related to this agency's activities remain under the strictest secrecy? How much information, which could change everything, is still undisclosed to the public? How much more has not been revealed to the wider audience? And how many new shocking stories are waiting for their time? All these questions are just the tip of the iceberg, and the truth, likely, we will never fully know.